Hi, Dr. Seema Sehgal. Welcome to Arcos platform. So, you've been practicing psychiatrist in a community for 25 years. I'm so glad you're here to be an expert on Arcos platform. Welcome. Tell me a little bit about you.
Thanks, Rupali. It is so exciting. I feel privileged to be part of this movement that I see you starting. I have been a practicing psychiatrist in Fremont for over 25 years and have had a really wide and varied experience in psychiatry. From my time working for Alameda County, where I saw the really extreme ends of the mental health spectrum with diseases like schizophrenia, severe bipolar disorder, all the way now to a lot of depression and anxiety and the aftermath of the pandemic that we are hopefully here to speak about a little bit today.
Yeah. So, you talked about what are the things that have changed recently. Let's talk about one issue that we have heard a lot of people talk about: social anxiety. We've seen a rise of it in the last few years. First of all, can you tell us what social anxiety really is?
Sure. How people think, behave, and feel in social situation varies, right, from person to person, because our behaviors are influenced so much by our own wiring, our upbringing, our parenting styles, our own childhood experiences. So all of us have a certain degree of anxiety when we are faced, in novel situations by, say, the need to public speak during interviews or meeting people for the first time. There are people who are traditionally shy. Now, social anxiety is a specific disorder where people's anxiety starts to really escalate even through everyday interactions, causing them severe embarrassment, self consciousness. They have a fear of being scrutinized, of being humiliated. They fear being criticized by people they are around. And so it leads to a real impact on their functioning. And this piece about functioning is what separates what could be just shyness or mild anxiety in someone from a disorder that requires treatment, because people with social anxiety disorder start to have an impact on their relationships, on their work relationships, their ability to interview, to speak up in projects, presentations. It starts to impact their peer relationships. And in order to avoid the embarrassment and fear and humiliation, they start to isolate. So their world starts to really shrink. And sometimes they can even, use maladaptive mechanisms like substance use to try and manage these really uncomfortable symptoms.
Yeah, no, that is really informative, right? I mean, it can go from one end to the other pretty quickly. Is that true?
Usually we see it starting to develop in the sort of mid to late teens. So 13, 14-year-olds are where we see it first emerge. And then it gradually sort of builds. And so the age group that will experience it probably the most is probably between 13 and about 23, 24. So, and as you can imagine, this is the time of most rapid brain growth. And so all experiences they have, whether it is their outside experiences, how they're perceived by the world, what is their own worldview, all begin to really have lasting impressions, and they can take these forward into life.
Yeah. So when is it that, like you said, like social anxiety, when is it the right time to visit a professional? Like when do you get professional? What are the symptoms that you decide that, okay, now this is the next step that we have to seek professional help?
Right. So this is an interesting and important question, because remember, when it first starts, it's happening to a child, right? And so the child has really no way of knowing that this is something that is unusual, that it's even a disorder or something that requires professional help. And parents, if they are not educated about signs and symptoms to look out for, could easily miss it. and it is sort of pushed under the sort of banner of, I have a very shy child, or I have this very quiet introverted child, all a while not knowing what is truly going on in the mind of the child. So when I think of symptoms, I think of putting them in two buckets. The first is sort of the psychological and emotional symptoms, which is really what's going on in the mind of the child. And the second bucket is the physical symptoms. That is the actual symptoms that are being experienced by the patient or the child. So under the psychological symptoms, you basically have thoughts, right? There is the fear of being humiliated, the fear that people are, going to laugh at you, that you're going to be bullied, or you're not going to be accepted, or you're being judged by people. And the fear, the thoughts, they sort of can increase in intensity and then lead to avoidance behaviors. So avoidance, where you refuse to be out with friends, you start to isolate. There's fear in simple activities like going and talking to a bank teller, to a checkout person at the grocery store. There's difficulty making eye contact. And the fear and the thoughts and the worries about how the world or people in it are perceiving you really become big. And gradually what happens is that that same criticism and judgment starts to become internalized. We start to then judge our own self. We start beating up on ourselves, becoming critical, and this further erodes self-esteem, our self-worth, our self-confidence. And so you can see how it starts to sort of build this trajectory. And so it's important to really come in and contain it. The physical symptoms are those of pretty much any anxiety disorder, where the person experiences feelings of being sweaty, or blushing, or flushing, or stammering, not finding the right words, feeling this terrible feeling in the pit of their stomach. So really, if you think of a panic or a fight or flight response, those are the physical symptoms to watch for. So for the parents, it's important to remember that often there will be either a change in their child's behavior. They become more clingy, they refuse to go out, they throw tantrums, they're making excuses. And when they do go out, they're not having a good time, or they come back and they're in a really bad mood. Because if social anxiety is left untreated, it leads to depression.
Mm.
And that is something that we want to avoid at all costs. So we want to be able to catch it and get the children the help that they need.
Once a person has these symptoms and they're diagnosed with a social anxiety disorder, what do you suggest they do next?
Rupali, what I would strongly recommend is that if someone thinks that they have the social anxiety disorder, or they worry that they are not doing as well as they had been, it's always a good idea to talk to a professional. And that professional need not be a therapist or a psychiatrist. That is hard to find in this current day and age. But your primary care physician, your pediatrician, if you're under 18, they are great resources and first steps. So someone that you can talk to freely about your feelings and emotions, and the circumstances that bring these emotions up, is a good first step. And at the end of the talk, we've listed some resources that are also wonderful to get more information about these illnesses and disorders, with tips and strategies that you can use to make your life better, even on a day-to-day basis as you're waiting to see someone.
Great. Thank you so much.
You're welcome.